G'day, Russell here, thanks for joining me. Over the last 15 years, one of the most common questions or comments I've heard from police applicants preparing themselves for an entrance exam or recruitment test is, I'm hopeless at maths, and so I'm really worried about the numeracy section. Is there anything I can do? Well, I know this might sound crazy, but you don't have to be good at maths to do the numeracy section well. What you do need to be good at, though, is remembering formulas, because the formulas will give you the tool to answer those maths-based questions. Let's have a look at a quick example or two where I'll show you how a formula can help you deal with questions that you might have previously struggled with. Let's jump into it. Okay, so here's an example of a framework that we teach to help applicants deal with the percentage-based questions in a numeracy skills exam. So on this left side, the left column represents the percentages and the right column represents the numbers. So this would be part of a whole number in this particular top corner here, and this would represent the whole number. So over here on this side we have the representation of percentages. So the percentage down the bottom here is always going to be 100. So for example, if 25% of a class of children, where there were 32 children in the class, the 100 is always going to be at the bottom, and that won't change. And if this was the question, what part of the whole class is equal to 25%? So it might be that 25% of a class of 32 children are left-handed. How many children are left-handed? Then we would know that the answer, and I'll show you the formula in a second, is equal to 8. So these top two boxes are always equal to each other. 25% of 100 is the same as 8 out of 32. Okay, and the same down the bottom, of course, 100% or the whole amount is equal to whatever the whole amount of the example is. So in this case, 32 children in a class. All right, so it could be that we have to find this number, or we may actually have to find one of these other numbers. We might know that 8 children are left-handed out of the 32 children, but we're asked to determine what percentage that represents. Or it may be that we know that 8 children are left-handed, which we know represents 25% of the class, and we're asked to determine what the number of children in the class actually is. So what's the whole amount? In which case, again, it would be 32. All right, so let me show you this simple formula that you can apply to any one of those types of questions, whether it's the percentage, the part, or the whole that you need to work out. Now again, there are different ways to work out questions in a mathematical sense, but if you follow this simple two-step process, you'll be able to answer any one of these questions regardless of how it's structured. Now step number one is that we have to cross multiply. So let's go back to our example where we've got 25% of the class. Now this will work whichever numbers we have, and we're asked to determine what the part happens to be. Now we cross multiply diagonally. Okay, so there's nothing here, so I can't multiply diagonally that way because there's nothing here to multiply it with. So I can only go this way. And when I do that, let me punch that in. 25 times 32 will give me 800. Okay, now that I've done that, 800, the next step is to simply divide by the remaining number, whatever that happens to be. So when I cross multiplied, I had 800. This is the remaining number, so I divide by the remaining number. And we know when we're dividing by 100, we can simply move the decimal point across to the left 2 places. And that's going to give us an answer of 8, which we had before. Okay, so cross multiply and then divide by the remaining number. If you do if you do those 2 steps, no matter which one of these you have or don't have, that formula is going to work for you. Cross multiply and divide by the remaining number. So if you were to use this framework and set it up like so, all you would need to do, whichever numbers you have, if it's 6 and 32 or whatever it might be, you simply cross multiply and then divide that by the remaining number, and you'll get the correct answer for a percentage-based question. All right, let's have a look at a quick ratios-based question where we use a similar framework and formula to come up with the right answer. All right, an example of a typical ratios-based question might be, Con the fruiterer picks apples and places them into a box. Now the ratio of red to green apples is 6:2. If Con picks 4 boxes of apples, how many red apples will he have in total? That's a typical kind of ratios-based question. So let's look at the formula or the framework to answer that question. Okay, so here's the framework that I teach our members to deal with ratios-based questions, and all we need to do is to populate the squares. Con picked 6 red apples and 2 green apples. That was the ratio, 6 to 2, red to green. So what we need to do now is just add those together to determine the total amount of apples in one box. Now we know that he picked 4 boxes in total, so we need to multiply 8 by 4 to get the total amount of apples that he picked. Okay, that gives us the total, but we still don't know how many red apples, or green apples for that matter, he picked in total. So what we do is we take this number and we push it across to the other 2 columns. And now we work our way down the columns by multiplying. Okay, the same way that we multiplied 8 by 4, we're going to multiply down the column. So here, I've got 6 times 4, which gives me 24. Now that's the answer to our question, but let's keep moving. We'll do the same in the next column. 2 times 4 green apples gives me 8 green apples. Now if I've done the calculations correctly, I should be able to add these 2 together and they should equal the total. 24 plus 8 equals 32. Alright, so all we need to do is populate the squares with the numbers that we've extracted from the question. And when we do that, we'll have all the information we need. Now in this particular example, it happened to be asking for how many red apples were there. So 24 is our answer. It might be that we're given some of this information and we need to work out the total number of apples that have been collected or picked. We can work that out. It may be that we need to know how many green apples there were. We can work out each of these components if we simply populate the boxes. Now as you're working through it, if you get to the answer before completing all of the boxes, you wouldn't need to go on and check any of the other stages. You could just populate the box with your answer and you're done with that particular question. Alright, so I hope you can see how simple frameworks or step-by-step processes can give you the tools to answer maths-based questions in the numeracy entrance exam. So if you're concerned about that, if you're hopeless with maths, you don't need to be good at maths. You do need to be good at remembering formulas or frameworks to get you through that stage. Alright, as always, I hope you found that helpful and I look forward to chatting again in the next video soon.